Welcome to the Il Duce podcast, a podcast on change and legacies in Italy. I'm host Diego, and in our 6th episode of this series, we will cover the fascist regime's push to create a fascist people and the ideology surrounding the process. On the outskirts of Rome exists the EUR district. This district today houses many of Italy's ministry buildings, as well as the headquarters of Eni and Confindustria. Jumping back 90 years, this area was chosen in the late 30s to host the 1942 World Fair. The area is dotted with a heavy concentration of fascist architecture, designed to show off fascist Italy and its exploits. The centerpiece of this exhibition is the Palazzo della Civiltà Italiana. Considered a modernist masterpiece by some, and a blight on a landscape by others, the building's purpose, as the name suggests, was to show off to the world what Italian civilization was, or more accurately, what fascism wanted it to be like. It is thus a telling sign that the halls of this building are littered with statues of masculine boxers and murals of Mussolini surrounded by soldiers, ready to swear their oath to him. This mural represents perfectly the fascist idea of the perfect Italian, aggressive, violent, and having an undying loyalty to the regime. The myth of the new man would play an integral part in the fascist push to consensus, and bring out both its ridiculous as well as its darker side. The trenchocracy is the aristocracy of the trenches. This quote from Mussolini in just 8 words represents quite neatly the virtues of the fascist new man. The new man, according to fascism, would be birthed from the fires of war. World War I, according to fascists, represented the dawn of a new era and people. It was a redemptive event for the past decadence of the Italian people. The apprenticeship of the trenches would lead to the birth of a new man, a strong, redemptive male figure who would lead the nation through a period of transformation. This new man would represent the spirit of strength, violence and youth, or giovanezza, learnt in the rolling hills of the Enzonzo or on the banks of the Piave. The neutralist and the non-interventionist had lost all honour of being called a man, being weak and deprived of courage and morals. The new Italian should be distinguished for his frankness, courage and discipline. Life was a permanent war and had to be combated with the discipline of a soldier. Only war could remove the flaws of old Italy. The myth of the new man became the beating heart of the Squadristi movement. They believed they represented a romantic expression of heroism and beauty in a disenchanted world ruled by weak statesmen. Violence was to be celebrated, especially its supposedly aesthetic features. To them, death was a crucial development for a man. To die in a punitive expedition against a socialist stronghold by eating a roof tile to the face was supposed to represent the reconsecration of a man's dignity and one's nobility as Italian. Through war, the new man would become the maker of history. Fascism claimed to believe that in history there was no end or final goal. The importance of history focused on who was the maker of it. Thus, through violence and war, the Italians, by extension fascism, would become the makers of history and not merely a spectator of it. The new man would have many legacies. It would be used extensively as a reason for fascism's expansionism and imperialism, an opportunity to make Italians into fascists. It was the basis of Italian militarism. This spawned into a new myth alongside that of the new man, and became linked with fascism's obsession with anything Roman. It also again normalized violence, a concept I have repeated in many of my episodes. The male redeemer figure, whilst not necessarily being birthed by fascism, is a common trope of many far-right organisations today, which teach a gospel of violence and hate to redeem Western civilization corrupted by the progressive elites. The myth of the new man was best represented by the cult surrounding Mussolini, which we have already talked about. He was represented as a man of action, a hard-working family man. He was cultured and incorruptible, a true man of the people. If one just glances at the Luce archives, they are immediately greeted with videos of Mussolini thrashing wheat, Mussolini eating beans with peasants, Mussolini helping to demolish houses during the constructions of the Via Fori Imperiali in Rome. The propaganda reached extreme levels. The lights in his office were left on into the night to give the impression that he worked continuously and he never slept. His speeches were fiery, he jutted out his chin and pulled facial contortions. He used his hands wildly and knew how to establish a connection with the crowd. The cult of Mussolini was what fascism used to inject Italy with the myth of the fascist man. Yet it couldn't be further from the truth. Mussolini was a heavy sleeper, and he was anything but a family man. He was unfaithful to his wife and suffered from several medical problems. He was superstitious and harboured a serious inferiority complex. It would be only a matter of time before the Italians began to see through the facade. Whilst the fascists were busy trying to shape men into fascist warriors, the regime also set its eyes on women and their rights. The fascist women had 2 purposes: birth children and support the male head of the family. In fascist eyes, women were resources critical to national security. Women would produce strong soldiers and legionnaires, ready to conquer and die for fascism. Thus, like any resources, they needed to be developed. Huge amounts of money were poured into maternity care and childcare to help women have children. The sad irony was that this increase in the quality of care was inversely proportional to the rights these women had. Whilst the fascist man was powerful and independent, women were subservient to their husband and the head of the family, cast down as mere resources for the fascist imperialistic dream. The process of the Inquadramento and the promotion of the new man also required the extensive modification of Italian customs and traits. There was an extreme push for this in the late 1930s when the regime radicalized itself. There was a new ideological zeal in this time. Mussolini had seen the Italians gradually grow apathetic and tired of the regime. The triumph of Ethiopia had slowly died down. Something was needed to reinvigorate the regime and the fascist dream of the new man. This was the basis of the anti-bourgeois campaign. When fascists refer to bourgeois, they do not mean the class of people who own the factors of production like socialists do. Instead, the bourgeois is anyone who isn't fascist. The bourgeois is a weak-willed man that has infected Italy with decadence. They needed to be purged from society. The people who had it easy until now supposedly had to face the wrath of the fascist regime. These were non-interventionists, socialists, people who didn't want war and weren't soldiers. This campaign began with the honestly pathetic reforms of customs. Italians were suddenly banned from using lei, a polite form of you, due to it suggesting subservience, and instead they encouraged to use voi. Handshaking was also banned and replaced with the Roman salute. Local dialects were cracked down upon heavily. Fascism needed to mould nationally conscious citizens into one, and language variation fettered this plan. The passo romano, or goose steps, were forced upon the army and the militia. It was ridiculous. The goose steps were risible and it was deeply offensive to the king. Voi quickly became the basis of many jokes, sometimes used in public but completely disregarded in the home. Informers and agents often reported how Italians preferred their mother's teachings rather than what the regime told them to do. However, there was a darker side to the anti-bourgeois campaign, and this was the anti-Jewish campaign. This seemingly came out of nowhere. Only 45,000 Italians were Jews, and many fascists were also Jews. The excuse used was that they were unreliable, un-Italian, and remnants of an old world, so basically bourgeois. The 1938 racial laws led to severe repression of Jews in Italy. They were forbidden to hold public office, join the PNF, own more than 50 hectares of land, run a business with over 100 employees, etc. Many businesses shut down, Jewish children were expelled, as were 1 in 12 university professors. However, it kind of backfired. It outraged the local population and the elite. The business elite had just lost countless partners, and even the church denounced this as immoral. In Turin, demonstrators of solidarity were held, and many in Rome, which had a sizable Jewish population, were said to have an unrelenting compassion towards the Jews. Even amongst fascist circles there was disgust, confusion, and anger. In Modena, the racial laws provoked serious dismays amongst the exquadristi because one of their martyrs was a Jew. This campaign, as I said before, misfired particularly badly. It didn't help in any shape or form in producing a new man. The laws and campaign were ridiculed and hated. They alienated the conservative elites of the church, business, courts, and army. It also made fascist rhetoric a lot more real for Italians. It finally shook them out of apathy, but not in a way the fascists wanted. Fascist ideology was dragging Italy to the gutter. Italy was being involved in wars that were bankrupting her in all the name of fascist prestige. The fascists always needed to do something new, something dangerous to prove to the people that they were destined to lead them. The ideology of the Inquadramento already doomed it from the beginning. The myth of the new man was in all honesty ridiculous, and ended up harming fascism rather than helping it. The myth of youth and strength was a hard one to keep up. Whilst the myth remained young, the fascists did not. Seeing 50-year-old, pot-bellied fascists running around, goose-stepping and jumping through hoops of fire didn't exactly please anyone. It looked theatrical at a time when the average Italian was suffering due to the double whammy of economic depression and autarky. It made fascism look out of touch with the real issues affecting everyday Italians. The ideology of the Inquadramento had already doomed it. The campaigns against Jews failed to rile up support and was purely based on desperation and finding someone to blame and hate. No attempts to control leisure or culture would save the rapidly sinking ship.